Hello children, we're going to see history in today's class. The name of the topic is the making of a global world. So from history chapter 4, the topic is the making of a global world. When we talk of globalization, we often refer to an economic system that has emerged since the last 50 years or so. But as you will see in this chapter, the making of the global world has a long history of trade, of migration, of people in search of work, the movement of capital, and much else. As we think about the dramatic and visible signs of global interconnectedness in our lives today, we need to understand the phases through which this world in which we live has emerged. Okay children, let's get into the lesson. Before entering into the lesson, let's see what is the meaning of global world. What do you mean by global world? In today's world, every aspect of our life is having influence of many parts of this world. Most of the household items we are using are being manufactured by some multinational companies. The Coke and Pepsi are from the US and Hyundai is from Korea, Suzuki is from Japan, selling cars under Maruti's banner. Okay children, we'll learn the meaning of globalization now. What do you mean by globalization? By globalization, we mean increasing integration between different economies of the world. This is achieved with removal of barriers on free flow of goods, services and capital between nations. So, globalization means trade between different countries, and this can be achieved only by removing the barriers or restrictions and allowing the goods, services and capital to move freely between the nations. The pre-modern world. All through history, human societies have become steadily more interlinked. From ancient times, travelers, traders, priests, and pilgrims traveled vast distances for knowledge, opportunity, and spiritual fulfillment or to escape persecution. They carried goods, money, values, skills, ideas, inventions, and even germs and diseases. As early as 3000 BCE, an active coastal trade linked the Indus Valley civilizations with present-day West Asia. So, during the ancient times, the travelers, traders, priests and pilgrims, they traveled very distant places for knowing things, for knowledge, opportunity and spiritual fulfillment. And what did they carry with them? They carried goods, money, values, skills, ideas, inventions, and even germs and diseases. For more than a millennia, Gauris, the Hindi Gaudi or sea cells, used as a form of currency from the Maldives found their way to China and East Africa. The long distance spread of disease carrying gems may be traced as far back as the 7th century. By the 13th century, it had become an unmistakable link. Silk routes link the world. The Silk routes are a good example of vibrant pre-modern trade and cultural links between distant parts of the world. The name Silk routes points to the importance of westbound Chinese silk cargoes along this route. Historians have identified several silk routes over land and by sea, knitting together vast regions of Asia and linking Asia with Europe and northern Africa. They are known to have existed since before the Christian era and thrived almost till the 15th century. Okay children, here they are talking about the Silk Road. The Silk Road was a series of ancient trade networks that connected China and the Far East with countries in Europe and the Middle East.
The route included a group of trading posts and markets that were used to help in the storage, transport, and exchange of goods. It was also known as the Silk Road. The name Silk Routes points to the importance of westbound Chinese silk cargoes along this route. Chinese silk cargoes. What do you mean by cargoes? Cargoes means goods carried on a ship, aircraft, or motor vehicle. And the historians, they have identified several silk routes both by land and by sea. But Chinese pottery also traveled the same route as did textiles and spices from India and Southeast Asia. In return, precious metals, gold, silver, flowed from Europe to Asia. Trade and cultural exchange always went hand in hand. Early Christian missionaries almost certainly traveled this route to Asia, as did early Muslim preachers a few centuries later. Much before all this, Buddhism emerged from eastern India and spread in several directions through intersecting points on the Silk routes. So the Chinese pottery also traveled the same route like how textiles and spices were exported from India and Southeast Asia, and in return precious metals like gold and silver were imported from India to Asia. And finally, the trade and cultural exchange, they all went hand in hand. It was going okay. And the early Christian missionaries, they traveled through the Silk Route to Asia, like how Muslim preachers a few centuries later, they have also done the same. And before all this, Buddhism emerged from eastern India and it got spread all over the places through Silk routes. So here we have got a picture. This shows the Silk Route trade as depicted in a Chinese cave painting in the 8th century. Next, food travels, spaghetti and potato. Food offers many examples of long distance cultural exchange. Traders and travelers introduce new crops to the lands they travel. Even ready foodstuff in distant parts of the world might share common origins. Take spaghetti and noodles. It is believed that noodles travel west from China to become spaghetti. Or perhaps Arab traders took pasta to 15th century Sicily, an island now in Italy. Similar foods were also known in India and Japan, so the truth about their origins may never be known. So here food can be said as an example for long distance cultural exchange. And traders and travelers, they travel to different places and where they introduce new crops to the land they traveled. And even the ready foodstuffs in distant parts of the world might share common origin. For example, if you take spaghetti and noodles, it is believed that noodles travel west from China to become spaghetti. And the Arab traders took pasta to 5th century Sicily, and it's an island now in Italy. And similar foods were also known in India and Japan, but we do not know the truth about the origin. Here we have got the picture of potatoes and spaghetti. Yet such guesswork suggests the possibilities of long distance cultural contact even in the pre-modern world. Many of our common foods such as potatoes, soya, groundnuts, maize, tomatoes, chilies, sweet potatoes and so on were not known to our ancestors until about 5 centuries ago. These foods were only introduced in Europe and Asia after Christopher Columbus accidentally discovered the vast continent that would later become known as Americas. Here we will use America to describe North America, South America and the Caribbean. In fact, many of our common foods came from America's original inhabitants, the American Indians. And sometimes the new crops could make the difference between life and death. Europe's poor began to eat better and live longer with the introduction of the humble potato. Ireland's poorest
peasants became so dependent on potatoes that when disease destroyed the potato crop in the mid 1840s, hundreds of thousands died of starvation. Here's a picture: merchants from Venice and the Orient exchanging goods from Marco Polo. This picture here depicts the Irish potato famine, which was illustrated in London News 1849. Hungry children digging for potatoes in a field that has already been harvested, hoping to discover some leftovers. During the Great Irish Potato Famine 1845 to 1849, around 10 lakh people died of starvation in Ireland and double the number immigrated in search of work. Okay children, we move to the next topic: conquest, disease and trade. The pre-modern world shrank greatly in the 16th century after European sailors found a sea route to Asia and also successfully crossed the Western Ocean to America. For centuries before, the Indian Ocean had known a bustling trade with goods, people, knowledge, customs, etc. crisscrossing its waters. The Indian subcontinent was central to these flows and a crucial point in their networks. The entry of the Europeans helped expand or redirect some of these flows towards Europe. Before its discovery, America had been cut off from regular contact with the rest of the world for millions of years. But from the 16th century, its vast lands and abundant crops and minerals began to transform trade and lives everywhere. Precious metals, particularly silver from mines located in present-day Peru and Mexico, also enhanced Europe's wealth and financed its trade and Asia. Legends spread in 17th century Europe about South America's fabled wealth. Many expeditions set off in search of El Dorado, the fabled city of gold. So here what they are saying is, before finding the sea route, America had been cut off from the regular contact with this rest of the world for millions of years. And after the 16th and from the 16th century, what happened? Its vast lands and abundant crops, its resources and minerals, it all began to transform trade and lives everywhere. And precious metals like silver from mines located in present-day Peru and Mexico, and they enhanced the Europe's wealth and financed its trade with Asia. The Portuguese and Spanish conquest and colonization of America was decisively underway by the mid-16th century. European conquest was not just a result of superior firepower. In fact, the most powerful weapon of the Spanish conquerors was not a conventional military weapon at all. It was the germs such as those of smallpox that they carried on their person. Because of their long isolation, America's original inhabitants had no immunity against these diseases that came from Europe. Smallpox in particular proved a deadly killer. So the Portuguese and Spanish conquest and the colonization of America was done in the mid-16th century, and the European conquest was not just a result of superior firework. They did not use the conventional military weapon at all. Then how did they do? It was the germs such as those of smallpox that they carried on their person. Because in America, the America's original inhabitants, they had no immunity against these diseases that came from Europe. And in fact, the smallpox was a deadly killer. Once introduced, it spread deep into the continent, ahead even of any Europeans reaching there. It killed and decimated whole communities, paving the way for conquest. Guns could be bought or captured and turned against the invaders, but not diseases such as smallpox, to which the conquerors were mostly immune. Until the 19th century, poverty and hunger were common in Europe. Cities were crowded and deadly diseases were widespread. Religious conflicts were common and religious dissenters were persecuted. What do you mean by dissenters? one who refuses to accept established beliefs and practices. And thousands therefore fled Europe for America. Here, by the 18th century, plantations worked by slaves captured in Africa were growing cotton and sugar for European markets. Until well into the 18th century, China and India were among the world's richest countries. They were also preeminent in Asian trade. However, from the 15th century, China is said to have restricted overseas contacts and retreated into isolation. China's reduced role and the rising importance of the Americas gradually moved the center of world trade westwards. Europe now emerged as the center of world trade. This picture here shows slaves for sale, New Orleans, illustrated in London News, 1851. A prospective buyer carefully inspecting slaves lined up before the auction. You can see 2 children along with 4 women and 7 men in top hats and suits waiting to be sold. To attract buyers, slaves were often dressed in their best clothes. Okay children, next we move to the 19th century, 1815 to 1914. The world changed profoundly in the 19th century. Economic, political, social, cultural, and technological factors interacted in complex ways to transform societies and reshape external relations. Economists identify 3 types of movement or flows within international economic exchanges. The first is the flow of trade, which in the 19th century referred largely to trade in goods, example, cloth or wheat. The second is the flow of labor, the migration of people in search of employment. The third is the movement of capital for short-term or long-term investments over long distances. So here we could see the world changed profoundly in the 19th century, and the economists identify 3 types of movements, or it is called as flows. The first flow is the flow of trade. For example, the trading of goods like cloth or wheat. And the second one is the flow of labor, the migration of people in search of employment. And the third one is movement of capital. And all 3 flows were closely interwoven and affected people's lives more deeply now than ever before. The interconnections could sometimes be broken. For example, labor migration was often more restricted than goods or capital flows. Yet, it helps us understand the 19th century world economy better if we look at the 3 flows together. The next topic, a world economic takes shape. A good place to start is the changing pattern of food production and consumption in industrial Europe. Traditionally, countries liked to be self-sufficient in food, but in 19th century Britain, self-sufficiency in food meant lower living standards and social conflict. Why was this so? Population growth from the late 18th century had increased and demand for food grains in Britain. As urban centers expanded and industry grew, the demand for agricultural products went up, pushing up food grain prices. Under pressure from landed groups, the government also restricted the import of corn. The laws allowing the government to do this were commonly known as the Corn Laws. Unhappy with high food prices, industrialists and urban dwellers forced the abolition of the Corn Laws. After the Corn Laws were scrapped, food could be imported into Britain more cheaply than it could be produced within the country. British agriculture was unable to compete with imports. Vast areas of land were now left uncultivated, and thousands of men and women were thrown out of work. They flocked to the cities or migrated overseas. As food prices fell, consumption in Britain rose. From the mid 19th century, faster industrial growth in Britain also led to higher incomes and therefore more food imports. Around the world, in Eastern Europe, Russia, America, and Australia, lands were cleared and food production expanded to meet the British demand. It was not enough merely to clear lands for agriculture. Railways were needed to link the agricultural regions to the ports. New harbours had to be built and old ones expanded to ship the new cargoes. People had to settle on the lands to bring them under cultivation. This meant building homes and settlements. All these activities in turn required capital and labour. Capital flowed from financial centres such as London. The demand for labour in places where labour was in short supply, as in America and Australia, led to more migration. Nearly 50 million people immigrated from Europe to America and Australia in the 19th century. All over the world, some 150 million are estimated to have left their homes, crossed oceans, and vast distances overland in search of a better future. Thus, by 1819, a global agricultural economy had taken shape, accompanied by complex changes in labor movement patterns, capital flows, ecologies, and technology. This picture here depicts Irish emigrants waiting to board the ship. Food no longer came from a nearby village or town, but from thousands of miles away. It was not grown by a peasant tilling his own land, but by an agricultural worker, perhaps recently arrived, who was now working on a large farm that only a generation ago had most likely been a forest. It was transported by railway, built for that very purpose, and by ships which were increasingly manned in these decades by low-paid workers from southern Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean. Some of this dramatic change, though a smaller scale, occurred closer home in West Punjab. Here, the British Indian government built a network of irrigation canals to transform semi-desert wastes into fertile agricultural lands that could grow wheat and cotton for export. The canal colonies, as the areas irrigated by the new canals were settled by peasants from other parts of Punjab. Of course, food is merely an example. A similar story can be told for cotton, the cultivation of which expanded worldwide to feed British textile mills, or rubber. Indeed, so rapidly did regional specialization in the production of commodities develop that between 1820 and 1914, world trade is estimated to have multiplied 25 to 40 times. Nearly 60% of this trade comprised primary products, that is, agricultural products such as wheat and cotton, and minerals such as coal. Next topic, role of technology. What was the role of technology in all this? The railways, steamships, the telegraph, for example, were important inventions without which we cannot imagine the transformed 19th century world. But technological advances were often the result of larger social, political, and economic factors. For example, colonization stimulated new investments and improvements in transport. Faster railways, lighter wagons, and larger ships helped move food more cheaply and quickly from faraway farms to final markets. Here, if we talk about the new technology or the role of technology, the railways, steamships, and the telegraph are all the example, and they were the important inventions without which we cannot imagine the transformed 19th century world. And all these technological advances are the result of larger social, political, and economic factors. The trade in meat offers a good example of this connected process. Till the 1870s, animals were shipped live from America to Europe and then slaughtered when they arrived there. But live animals took up a lot of ship space. Many also died in voyage, fell ill, lost weight, or became unfit to eat. Meat was hence an expensive luxury beyond the reach of the European poor. High prices in turn kept demand and production down until the development of a new technology, namely refrigerated ships, which enabled the transport of perishable foods over long distances. Now, animals were slaughtered for food at the starting point in America, Australia, or New Zealand, and then transported to Europe as frozen meat. This reduced shipping costs and lowered meat prices in Europe. The poor in Europe could now consume a more varied diet. To the earlier monotony of bread and potatoes, many, though not all, could now add meat and butter and eggs to their diet. Better living conditions promoted social peace within the country and support for imperialism abroad. So there was difficulty in shifting animals from America to Europe because they were live animals. They were shifting the live animals, and on the voyage some animals died and some fell ill, lost weight, and they became unfit to eat. And due to this, meat was hence an expensive luxury beyond the reach of the European poor. So they hiked the prices, and where people were not able to eat meat in their diet. Later, what happened? Animals were slaughtered for food and they started shipping as frozen meat. So this reduced shipping cost and lowered meat prices in Europe. So the poor in Europe could now consume a more varied diet. Next topic, late 19th century colonialism. Trade flourished and markets expanded in the late 19th century. But this was not only a period of expanding trade and increased prosperity. It is important to realize that there was a darker side to this process. In many parts of the world, the expansion of trade and a closer relationship with the world economy also meant a loss of freedoms and livelihoods. Late 19th century European conquest produced many painful economic, social, and ecological changes through which the colonized societies were brought into the world economy. Look at a map of Africa. You will see some countries' borders run straight as if they were drawn using a ruler. Well, in fact, this was almost how rival European powers in Africa drew up the borders, demarcating their respective territories. In 1885, the big European powers met in Berlin to complete the carving up of Africa between them. Britain and France made vast additions to their overseas territories in the late 19th century. Belgium and Germany became new colonial powers. The US also became a colonial power in the late 1890s by taking over some colonies earlier held by Spain. The next topic, Rinderpest or the cattle plague. In Africa, in the 1890s, a fast-spreading disease of cattle plague or rinderpest had a terrifying impact on people's livelihoods and the local economy. This is a good example of the widespread European imperial impact on colonized societies. It shows how in this era of conquest, even a disease affecting cattle reshaped the lives and fortunes of thousands of people and their relations with the rest of the world. Historically, Africa had abundant land and a relatively small population. For centuries, land and livestock sustained African livelihoods and people rarely worked for a wage. In late 19th century Africa, there were few consumer goods that wages could buy. If you had been an African possessing land and livestock, and there was plenty of both, you too would have seen little reason to work for a wage. In the late 19th century, Europeans were attracted to Africa due to its vast resources of land and minerals. Europeans came to Africa hoping to establish plantations and mines to produce crops and minerals for export to Europe. But there was an unexpected problem: a shortage of labor willing to work for wages. Employers used many methods to recruit and retain labor. Heavy taxes were imposed which could be paid only by working for wages on plantations and mines. Inheritance laws were changed so that peasants were replaced from land. Only one member of a family was allowed to inherit land, as a result of which the others were pushed into the labor market. Mine workers were also confined in compounds and not allowed to move out freely.
Then came rinderpest, a devastating cattle disease. Rinderpest arrived in Africa in the late 1880s. It was carried by infected cattle imported from British Asia to feed the Italian soldiers invading Eritrea in East Africa. Entering Africa in the east, rinderpest moved west like forest fire, reaching Africa's Atlantic coast in 1892. It reached the Cape, Africa's southernmost tip, 5 years later. Along the way, rinderpest killed 90% of the cattle. The loss of cattle destroyed African livelihoods. Planters, mine owners, and colonial governments now successfully monopolized what scarce cattle resources remained to strengthen their power and to force Africans into the labor market. Control over the scarce resource of cattle enabled European colonizers to conquer and subdue Africa. So the rinderpest, which is a cattle disease, and it arrived in Africa in the late 1880s, and due to this disease and the loss of cattle destroyed African livelihoods.
Okay children, we have come to the end of the session. For your home assignment, write the book back question and answer which is sent through PDF, and also complete the worksheet given. And for your activity, imagine that you are an agriculture worker who has arrived in America from Ireland. Write a paragraph on why you chose to come and how you are earning your living. Okay children, thank you. We'll see you in the next session.